Could COVID vaccine mandates come back to Texas? We talk with State Representative Brian Harrison. Plus, Republican Party of Texas Chairman Matt Rinaldi previews the upcoming impeachment trial of Attorney General Ken Paxton. I'm Brandon Waltons. This is The Headline. It's been over 3 years now since the start of the COVID lockdowns back in 2020. And the Biden administration is teasing a new COVID vaccine. You've seen reports in some of the left-wing media saying that perhaps COVID cases could be on the rise. People might need to wear masks again, lock down, get their vaccine mandates. Here to talk about what Texas has done and maybe more importantly, what Texas has yet not done to ban COVID vaccine mandates. We have State Representative Brian Harrison. Representative Harrison, thank you so much for joining. And I think it would surprise a lot of people, not just in Texas, but across the country, to know that in Texas, employers can still mandate that you get a COVID vaccine or else you can lose your job.
You know, that my only reaction here is to laugh, because if not, I think I'd be crying. No, people are shocked to learn. They do not believe it. That in the great and freedom-loving state of Texas, not only have we not banned COVID vaccine mandates, unfortunately, because of a handful of elected Republicans, we've actually protected COVID vaccine mandates in the state of Texas. So while other Republican states across the country have taken bold action to protect their citizens, here in Texas, and I, by the way, believe firmly that Texas should be leading the fight nationally against COVID tyranny, we're not even following.
Yes, and you've been pretty vocal on calling out some of those Republicans. For example, Representative Dustin Burrows, who chairs the Calendars Committee. What was his role in this?
Well, here's the reality. 30 million Texans want and deserve their medical freedom to be protected. And here's the good news in this story, and the sad story. The good news is that almost every elected Republican in Texas agrees with them. I filed the Texas COVID Vaccine Act almost 2 full years ago. I don't even know how many legislative sessions we have had to pass it and failed to pass it. But here's the good news. The Texas Senate overwhelmingly passed the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act, which would have banned all COVID vaccine mandates in the state of Texas. And almost every single Republican in the Texas House of Representatives supports banning COVID mandates, supports the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act. I think I probably had at least maybe even more than half of the entire Republican caucus wanted to sign on to my bill, the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act, as a co-author. And it passed in the Texas House Public Health Committee by 10-1. Every single Democrat even supported this bill, except for one Democrat out of Houston, Ann Johnson, who was explicit that she wants unvaccinated Texans to be fired. So look, it passed the Senate overwhelmingly, it passed the House Public Health Committee overwhelmingly, and it went to the Texas House Calendars Committee, where the Republicans on that committee chose to, not instead of banning COVID mandates, they chose to protect the practice of allowing unvaccinated Texans to be fired, and they killed that bill. Yet if that bill had gotten to the floor, it would have passed overwhelmingly.
It's sort of an unwritten rule in Austin and the legislature that you're not supposed to call these people out publicly. You've certainly done that. Have you gotten any heat from that?
Let me tell you what, my constituents, the 200,000 Texans that I'm honored to support, not only do they deserve, they are demanding bold, conservative leadership from their elected officials who are not too afraid to tell them the truth. They want to know what's going on behind their backs in Austin. And here's the reality. Democrats and liberals are given power in Austin, but they're not given, it's not happening on the front page of the papers. It's not happening under the Klieg lights and in front of the microphones. It's happening in behind closed doors of these committee rooms where Democrats are empowered to do two things. Pass liberal bills. I can't even tell you how many liberal government expanding bills passed the Texas House. But unfortunately, and this is a good example, Democrats are allowed to work with the Republican leadership of the Texas House to kill major priority bills. In this case, a ban on COVID vaccine mandates, or also to rein in governor's executive powers. So we don't have lockdowns like we saw in 2021. That was another bill that the Texas House Calendars Committee chose to kill. So it's just the truth. If it were not for the Republicans on the Texas House Calendars Committee, COVID vaccine mandates would be banned in the state of Texas.
Last question. We, of course, have some special sessions on the horizon, it looks like. Is this an issue that you think could could get solved in a special session perhaps this year?
Well, especially with the Biden administration doing everything it can to bring back COVID tyranny. Regardless of whether it's put on the agenda, I have asked the governor, and I will continue to ask the governor that he add it to the agenda. He's right to drag the legislature back to Austin. We had such a spectacularly unconservative session. We left so many things undone, from border security to COVID vaccine mandates to school choice to deregulation to COVID emergency powers. I mean, the list is very long of the things we didn't do for the people of Texas. I have committed, I will file the Texas COVID Vaccine Freedom Act every single special session we have, regardless of whether it's on the agenda. And again, here's the good news. Almost every single Republican in the Texas House and the Texas Senate wants to pass that bill. They want to ban COVID vaccine mandates. So I just hope that Texas House leadership does the right thing and allows Texas to finally take the lead in fighting against COVID tyranny.
Representative Harrison, thank you so much for joining us.
Always great to be with you.
Stick around. We'll be right back.
Michael, millions of Texas voters went to the polls. They elected Republicans thinking that they were going to get a certain outcome. And then you have Dade Phelan, with the help of some bad actors in the Texas House who run as Republicans, have literally stolen the Texas House of Representatives away from the voters and given it to Democrats.
The impeachment trial in the Senate of Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton begins on Tuesday. Here to talk about what to expect, we have Republican Party of Texas Chairman Matt Rinaldi. Matt, thank you so much for joining. And, you wear a few different hats in the sense that you're the Republican Party of Texas Chairman, but you yourself are a former member of the Texas House. You're a lawyer. And so I kind of want to ask a little bit about your perspective on this from all three of those. I guess starting out first from the party perspective, how significant is this that right now in Texas, we have the Texas legislature that will be tied up now for at least 2 or 3 weeks going forward on a impeachment of a Republican elected official that was led by Democrats?
Right. I mean, it's significant in two different ways. One, in the way you just described, we have one of our three most important Republican statewide office holder who had just won an election overwhelmingly, now being attacked in an attempt to undo the election that just took place. That's incredibly significant. It does not bode well if this succeeds for future Republican office holders. I mean, who's next? Is Dan Patrick next? Is Sid Miller next? If we let them get away with this, this certainly will not be the last time it happens. And then secondly, we're entering a very important presidential election year where Texas is going to be hotly contested. How does it bode for those election prospects in the presidential election when we're spending, what is it going to be, about a month of our time, more if you include what we've already spent, talking about allegations against our Attorney General that were already litigated in the previous election? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't bode well for Republicans. It's absolutely inexcusable that House Republicans allowed Democrats to drag them along on this crusade.
Being a lawyer yourself, a lot of people have said it. Dan Patrick has said this as well. This is a political process, right? This isn't necessarily akin to a criminal court or a civil court or anything like that. It's a little bit different as they sort of make up this process. But as we look at the rules and we look at how this thing is structured, what are your thoughts as far as whether or not this trial is set up to be fair?
Yeah, I mean, it is. I do have faith in the Senate, and Dan Patrick is the presiding officer. He got Judge Lana Myers to advise him. I have faith in the Senate that I did not have at all in the House, both retrospectively and looking forward to the process before the impeachment actually happened. I think it is structured like a trial. There's a couple things I definitely would have changed about the rules. More specifically, I see one fatal flaw in the rules, which is we're going to have a motion to dismiss process up front, which basically asks, well, assuming everything in the articles of impeachment is true, should Ken Paxton be impeached, right? That's the question you ask. Assuming everything's true, would this sustain an impeachment? And on the motion to dismiss, I think the obvious answer is no, because of the prior term doctrine, which has been applied for 150 years. And what that says is you can't be impeached for things that happened prior to your last election. And why is that? It's because we trust the people to make that decision. All of these things were litigated, save for one article of impeachment in the previous election. And those should be thrown out. The problem is it's a 50% vote in the Senate to throw out an article of impeachment. But if more than 1/3 oppose impeachment, the article of impeachment can't be sustained. So what happens if you have more than 1/3 and less than 1/2 of the senators voting to dismiss? Well, you're going to go into a trial and a 2-week-long presentation of evidence where you know the result of the trial, because more than 1/3, more than it takes to acquit, already told you, yeah, no matter what the evidence says, I'm voting to acquit. That's something that shouldn't happen in the rules. Personally, I do hope the senators remedy that by, if they know they're going to get 1/3 of the votes or more in favor of dismissing, I do hope they get the extra couple of votes to save us, 2 weeks of time in a brutal process.
Speaking as now a former member of the Texas House, as I mentioned, this is something that the House had taken time on, but now we're going to have the Senate taking time on, all while people are saying, even the governor has said, that lawmakers need to come back for a special session due to failure to pass some conservative priorities. What would you rather right now see the legislature working on instead of impeaching the Attorney General?
Pretty much anything. Really, I'm good with just about anything, since they shouldn't be impeaching the Attorney General anyway, since it's an illegal impeachment, since it's completely imprudent. I would much rather see them working on school choice, for example, maybe banning taxpayer-funded lobbying, or passing the 50 or more conservative bills that the House killed last session.
Yeah, seems like those are probably pretty important. Last question. It's sort of the simple one, but if you had to guess, looking at this process, do you think that this trial ends with the Attorney General being removed from office?
I don't, and I have to say I don't, because number one, I don't think the law supports it. I don't even think they should reach evidence because of the prior term doctrine. And then secondly, I don't believe that the evidence is going to play out that to support impeachment. I mean, they held all of the securities law claims in abeyance, the Senate did. And they did because they're frivolous claims. I mean, I'm a securities lawyer myself, and those have been known for quite a while, and they're ridiculous allegations and just an interpretation of the law that is just completely unapplicable to other cases that they're taking there. Regarding the new allegations involving Nate Paul, if they were good, the House would have actually conducted an impeachment trial the way that it should be conducted. But the House didn't do that. The House hid in the shadows. They conducted this investigation with nobody knowing until 48 hours before the proceeding. They then took it to the floor without allowing members to interview witnesses, without having cross-examination of witnesses by any member, without letting members talk to investigators. They instead had a Democrat on the investigating committee hire a bunch of people who talked to witnesses, then came up with a written report, and then they just plopped the written report in front of the entire House of Representatives and gave them 2 hours of debate before they voted. I mean, they spent more time debating tampon taxes this session than they debated impeaching our Attorney General. So, no, I don't think it's going to result in impeachment. I think grassroots Republicans would be outraged, rightly so, if it did. And I think, to be honest, it should be dismissed before even hearing the evidence based on the law.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. It's interesting. I was thinking about this as we saw the events with President Trump over the last week or two. It is interesting to see the silence from those who have been involved in the Paxton impeachment in the House when it comes to what's happening with President Trump.
Well, it's kind of similar in a way when you think about it, right? So if you remember, I'd said this on the Texas Heist documentary, which everybody should go watch because it's fantastic. But I had said that nobody in the Republican Party was talking about impeaching the Attorney General prior to 48 hours before the impeachment. This isn't being driven by Republicans. You know who was talking about impeaching the Attorney General? Democrats were. And they started talking about it in January 7th, 2021. And they weren't trying to impeach him for any of the articles that are currently up. Chris Turner, chair of the Democratic caucus, was talking about impeaching the Attorney General because he didn't like a position he took in certain lawsuits challenging the 2020 election results. And that's what you see going on in Georgia, right? You see Trump's lawyers being indicted for positions they took in lawsuits relating to the 2020 election. When you think about this, we are criminalizing legal challenges to any election. We're criminalizing the legal profession. And I think this is an extension of that.
Absolutely frightening. Thank you so much, Matt, for joining and for plugging the Texas Heist. We appreciate it.
Sure.
And as we end this week's episode of The Headline, we have some exciting news. Next week, The Headline goes daily. That's right, daily. Every day, we'll be coming to you at 5 o'clock with a recap of some of the biggest stories and why it matters. And with the impeachment trial of Ken Paxton starting on Tuesday, there should be no shortage of things to talk about. Better yet, you can watch it on TexasScorecard.com, YouTube, the Texas Scorecard app, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and now your favorite podcasting platform. That's all right here at Texas Scorecard. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great weekend.
No ads, no paywalls, no government grants, and no corporate masters. Just real news for real Texans. This is Texas Scorecard.